Iron Maiden have been pumping out their wild brand of heavy metal for well over 25 years, with every one of their 13 studio albums and 3 live albums to date becoming major top 10 successes, both at home in the UK and in more than 25 countries around the world. Despite a lengthy recording history and a variety of lineup changes, Maiden have managed to carry their sound into the new millennium. With heavy metal currently enjoying a worldwide resurgence in popularity, Maiden are once again leading the rock revival. The story of Iron Maiden officially began in 1971, when a 15-year-old youth, Steve Harris, learnt to play bass.
Iron Maiden's history goes back to the East End in sort of like mid to late 1970s, where punk was at its prime, and Steve Harris had long hair and didn't fit in visually or musically. I think he was in a band to start with called Gypsy's Kiss, and was playing songs that were written by other members of that band. He started writing his own stuff, which was very typically Maiden, even back in those days, because it had lots of time changes in it, and the members of Gypsy's Kiss were like, well, we can't play this, you know, you've got 3 different time changes, this song is too complicated, you know, from a structural point of view. So he decided that he'd form his own band.
The concept of Iron Maiden was born in 1975, and in the spring of 1976, Harris's new band secured a residency at the Cart and Horses pub in Stratford, in the capital's East End. It was the first of what would be a host of local gigs all over East London, and the band soon built up a strong local following. Martin Blackman was one of the band's earliest fans.
A friend of ours told us about this band because we were all into metal then when we was kids, and there wasn't no places for metal bands. You know, you never heard of a metal band playing in pubs. It's just the typical shite bands, you know, cover bands and all this. A friend of ours, Steve Wright, said, come and see this band. They play down the Cart and Horses in Stratford, which is Maryland Point. They're called Iron Maiden. So, like, all of us from the pub, it must have been 8 or 9 of us, we was all like, you know, dressed up the same, all the Levi jacket and, you know, all the hair out here. And we shot down at this pub in Stratford, and there they were, Iron Maiden, and I couldn't believe it, what I heard. I couldn't believe it. It's the first time I've been watching bands, you know, when you go and see a band, but to see the actual pub band, that every track was outstanding. I couldn't believe it. Every track they played was just different class. And the lineup then, when we used to see them, there was a guy called Dennis on lead vocals, the drummer, which Den used to call him Uncle Ron, was Ron Rebel. Had Bob Sawyer on guitar, who had a nice bird, by the way. Stevie Harris on bass, and Dave Murray on guitars. We used to go and watch them down the Bridge House. That was probably the best venue, because they played there more than anything. And it just happened that the band sort of took us in. Because eventually, Steve Harris and Denise used to come and visit us in our local pub in Leighton, the Law Clyde. They used to come down at nights and visit us. But the thing was, they used to come in as they were on stage, like big boots on and that, you know, and it looked weird, you know. They come in the pub and see us, and everyone's looking at me in the pub, and there's like Denise with his great big flares and his platform boots on. It was good fun. And in the end, we got so many people to come and see them. Like, I got my brother, he started coming to see them. Mark O'Malley got all his friends from the post office. So at the end of it all, when we used to go, there was a big crowd of us. But in the beginning, there was only about 8 or 9 of us who used to go and see them. And the funny thing is, talk about headbanging. I've never done so much headbanging. I mean, from the start of the gig to the end. And the amount of beer we used to throw at ourselves was just unreal, you know what I mean? When I used to do the Iron Maiden track, Dennis would get his mouth full of blood capsules, and he'd get a sword and he'd go straight through his mouth like that, and all blood would spurt out everywhere, and the stage was covered in blood. Because actually the flyers they used to give out, right, was Iron Maiden with a picture of a mouth with all blood coming out. You ain't seen nothing yet.
After 6 months, the lineup changed. Vocalist Dennis Wilcock took it upon himself to fire guitarist Dave Murray, who went to join local band Urchin. In time, Dennis also moved on. By 1978, Ron Rebel decided to up and go. Harris went down to an Urchin gig and persuaded Dave Murray to rejoin Maiden, and recruited ex-Smiler drummer Doug Sampson before setting off to look for a new singer. Eventually, a mate of Steve Harris's recommended a singer by the name of Paul Di'Arno.
We had a mate we used to see down a local pub, a bloke called Trevor Searle. So Trev knew Steve and all that, and seen Maiden. He sort of said, "Oh, they're looking for a singer." And I went down to see him, and we walked out of there after about 10 minutes. We was laughing our asses off. We're punks, and that weren't really our scene, you know what I mean? Anyway, after a couple of months later, I sort of met up with Steve and that, and started talking and that. Went round his house. Persuaded me to go down for an interview, like a rehearsal and that, and have a jam. And I'm sitting there trying to sing songs I've got no idea what they are, playing by Deep Purple or something. So we done that. I sort of knew the song vaguely, but just sort of hummed it and awed it and went through. And then Steve come round in the Sunday afternoon and sort of said, "Well, you know, we tried a few other guys, but you got the job if you want it." And I'm like, "Well, I don't really give a fuck, to be honest with you." Wasn't that interested, but then I see Steve a bit more, and then we went round his house and we started to write together. And as soon as we started writing, there was something there.
When I first met Paul, it was about 1970 at George Mitchell School. Must have been about 11 or 12 then. He was just like us, hated school, like we all did at that age. And we used to do the same old things. Used to muck about, bunk off, do what kids do at that sort of age. And then when we moved on to County High, Leighton County High, which is in Essex Road, which was the next school up, it was exactly the same thing. We were always getting in trouble, Paul Taylor. Always getting in trouble. He was well known for it, like we all was. He was a good lad, you know. I liked him. Like, you know, sometimes you might have thought he was telling a few porkies, but you know what I mean. But like we always used to tell porkies when we was kids that age. You know what I mean? Yeah, he was quite a nice bloke. Didn't know he was going to be a singer, though. Never had that. Didn't think he had that in him at all. You don't see it at that age. You know what I mean?
Another well-known East Ender, Garry Bushell, then writing for the weekly music magazine Sounds, was an early supporter of Maiden.
Obviously, I remember Paul Di'Arno very much because he was such a big personality. He was your archetypal wide boy, very cocky, very funny, always had his eye on the Maiden chance. Not all of his stories were true, as to be said. He had a prone to exaggerate. He was prone to play up to whoever the audience was. I mean, so the first time he met me because he knew I'd written a book on two-tone. He told me how much he loved two-toners and how much he liked the Cockney Rejects, because I'd managed the Cockney Rejects. So he would give you whatever story you thought you wanted to hear, but he was still hugely entertaining.
As the band continued to play locally, Blackman was amazed to hear that Di'Arno had joined his favourite band.
Well, I must have been, when was it late? Must have been about 17, 18. I was come out of a pub in Walthamstow and walked into a chip shop. And there was a bit of aggro going on there with the bloke behind the chippy. I looked in there and there was Taylor in there. I go, "God blimey, Paul, I ain't seen you for years, blah, blah, blah." I was chatting away. And he was all pissed, and he was pissed as well. And he was talking to me, and I said, "What are you up to?" He said, "I'm in a band. I'm a singer now." And I thought, "I'm not one of his, like, he's not telling me porkies here, is he?" And he said, "No, I'm a singer in a band." I said, "I didn't know you could sing." He said, "Yeah, I can sing. I'm not a bad singer." And it weren't until I found out who he was with, I was shocked, you know what I mean? Because we always knew him as, you know, just like one of the boys, but we couldn't understand it when he was a singer, and did he have a voice on him? It was unreal. You know what I mean?